Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Thrive, Not Just Survive. This is my edition on Friday with Dr. Bryanbruce. And I want to start out with just making note of the conversation that we're continuing from last week. Martin Luther King said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." And really, I reflected on this because I believe that it's time for us collectively to come together and be a part of this change. It's not enough, I don't think, to be just aware or just concerned about our current state of affairs. I think it's even more than standing in solidarity. I think it's really about stepping up. We have to come together, we have to work together, and we have to come up with ways of being part of that change. Because I think it's easy to shake our heads in dismay and complain about all that's wrong with the world. But as Gandhi reminded us in words and actions, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. And this is what I am bringing to this platform, to the voice that I have here, in bringing awareness and coming together as a group to make change happen. Now, we all know that social justice is an underlying principle for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. But while we can agree with this, many of us are at a loss when it comes to acting on or upholding the principles of social justice in our everyday lives. So today, I want to continue this conversation with Dr. Cheryl about what we started last week in talking about Black Lives Matter. And I want to bring her on because I have some questions for her. So let's get this conversation started. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Hey, Nasira, I'm doing well. It's been a very difficult week, a lot going on, obviously.
Yeah.
And because I have had a lot of people contacting me, talking to me about my opinion and things going on, I have had to stay plugged in and
Yeah.
watching it all. So that's been difficult. Again, it's brought up a lot of emotions. And then this week is always, as you know, a difficult week for me because of my own
Yes.
battles.
Yeah.
So it's been rough, but overall, I'm doing well. I'm doing all the things that I talked about in order to maintain my own mental and physical health. So I'm being a good girl.
That's good. I guess, I mean, this is where we practice what we preach, right? And those are things that really
Absolutely.
help us when we are in places of struggle or, right now, emotionally, I think everyone is charged. And in your case, probably more so based on everything that you're dealing with this week. And so I really appreciate your time coming on and sharing your wisdom with me and my audience, because I think this conversation that we're having is a very important one, especially during these times when there is so much unrest. So I do have a couple of questions that I've written out, if that's okay. Let me start out with my first one that I wanted to start
Okay.
with was, how can we start creating an inclusive process? So last week we talked about sort of all the places where things were broken, how
Right.
all of
Right.
those areas we already know are broken and needs to be addressed. But how can we start with at least an inclusive strategy?
I think that the first and biggest part of creating an inclusive strategy is what you're already doing, and that's opening the lines of communication and being honest, to have an honest discourse, not being afraid to ask the hard questions, not being afraid to hear the hard answers. And that's actually a difficult first part because our nature as human beings is to be defensive, to protect ourselves, to protect our own feelings, to keep ourselves in our own comfort zone. And we are dealing with systemic racism, which, by the way, this week there's the pushback, and a lot of people are starting to say, oh, well, there is no systemic racism. And I've heard, and racism doesn't exist. And depending on which side you're sitting on and which channel you're tuning into, you can convince yourself that this is the case. And this is our defense mechanisms, kicking in. We don't want change. We don't want to be out of our comfort zone. We have to be very careful not to let that happen and not to fight to remain in the status quo. Things are broken, things need to be changed, and in order for that to happen, we have to be willing to remain vulnerable. We have to be willing to have the honest discourse. And even though emotions may be bubbling to the top, we have to be willing to have respectful conversations.
Absolutely.
We cannot be name calling. We cannot be just talking out of the sides of our face, letting whatever we're thinking fly. We need to, at this point, think about what it is we're saying, especially in terms of thinking about what the intent is of what we're saying. Sure, we're all emotionally charged, we're all in pain to some degree. There is fear, there is anger, a lot of emotions bubbling to the top. We need to not let just our emotions cloud our intellectual mind, because we need to bring both to the table for this conversation. And one of the things that we do need to bring to this table is compassion. And that doesn't matter what side you're on. And one of the things that I'm hearing from the Black community is, we've been at this too long. We've been compassionate too long. We've been turning the other cheek too long. And now we want action. And that is true. And we do have to maintain that stand. We are pushing forward for action. We cannot be passive any longer. But that does not mean that we cannot also listen, because we are also a part of the problem.
Right. And I think that's the honesty, right? Where you can be advocates of the truth and going for what you believe in terms of equality and coming together. But there's problem and solution, and we can be parts of both. And we need to come to a
Yes.
place where we can understand ourselves better, to know how we
Yes.
are showing up. Perhaps we don't think we're part of the problem, and we think, oh, racism doesn't exist in my heart. But truly, I think we have to dig deep and figure out some of the things that we're saying, and subconsciously, maybe even those beliefs that may actually be underlying with some racism or some racist kinds of beliefs. So my next question to you was, how do you promote, or how can we promote social justice every day? Like, make it part of our day-to-day interactions in our learning in our life. How would you suggest that we do that every day?
Well, one of the things that we have to do is we have to work on it every day. And this is not going to stay in the forefront of our mind continuously, because we have to get on with life and do all of the things that we have to manage. One of the things that we can't lose sight of is that we're in the middle of COVID-19 still. It's kind of taken a back seat to everything that's going on, but we are in the middle of COVID-19. And on the other side of that is change, and we're coming out of that. So we'll be dealing with that. And right now, this is intense, and this is in the forefront of everything. We need to not let it fall by the wayside as soon as it gets old, because it will get old, because it's so emotionally charged that we can't stay at this level. We talked about cortisol levels and everything, and how exhausting that is and how difficult it is on the body. So it cannot stay at this level of intensity, and yet we have to deal with it just as aggressively. And part of that is, even though it may not be in the forefront, to maintain it in our subconscious, to maintain awareness of ourselves, what we are doing, what we are saying, and how that impacts other people. What I am not talking about is falling back into the idiot idea of politically correct. I don't want you to be politically correct. I want you to be correct.
Right.
And being correct, as you said, means examining your own self and really being honest with yourself and saying, what are my racist ideas? And we all have them. This is not a white America thing. This is not a white thing. Racism exists cross culturally all around the world. You have your racist ideas. I have my racist ideas. As people of color, our racist ideas may be a little bit different because a lot of it is defensive racism. We've had to create these ideas in our community for our self protection. And we may not we don't enjoy the benefits of the systemic racism, which is part of our pushback. But still, there are racist ideas that stem out of ignorance of other people's behaviors and cultures, or that stem out of reaction to our own experiences. So if we've had bad experiences with a different person or different people that represent a different culture, we have a tendency to say those people.
Yes.
When we haven't had an experience with all of those people, what we've had an experiences with is one or two or a group of people who we take to represent a larger group when they don't. They represent their group or their individual thought. A lot of us haven't even had an experience with a group of people. Our experience with the group of people has been what is told to us on TV or what has been told to us on Facebook. And Facebook, by the way, we have to be careful of, especially as we're going forward. Or I should say social media in general. I'm not just going to pick on Facebook. I'm going to say social media in general, because we have to understand that anything can get thrown up on the wall there. And people are saying all sorts of outlandish things. We have to understand that people have agendas, and the things that they're saying may not be based in truth at all. So, in order to make this a daily thing, we have to become investigative reporters. You should be an investigative reporter every day of your life in your life anyway. That's called learning. And we should be on a road of lifelong learning and self development. Part of that means analyzing the information that we're taking in, sifting through it, thinking about what's real, what's not real, and how is all of this information impacting not just us, but other people around the world. We are all one people. And what we do right here in our own tiny little pool, if we toss that pebble, there is a ripple. That ripple is felt all around the world. Something I do today, something we do today, you and I having this conversation here today, somebody in Swaziland is watching this conversation. Somebody else in Swaziland may not even have internet, but they're going to talk to somebody who talked to somebody who talked to somebody who talked to somebody multifold down the way who talked to somebody who watched this conversation, and it will impact them. And then something that they do will impact someone in the UK, and so on and so on. So every single thing we do every day of our life impacts everybody else around the world. We have to keep that in mind, and we have to keep doing the things that are positive. Sometimes they'll be difficult, sometimes they'll be charged, but as long as the conversations are open and as long as they're open with compassion and with an intent to understand and to positively change, then we make a difference.
That's awesome. I think the way you framed that is really important, right? That it's being aware and then also analyzing the information that's being fed, whether it's social media, whether it's television news, whatever it is. Have to use our critical thinking and look at that and filter it, because everything that you read may not be the truth. And so I think that's our responsibility, as humans in this world working through this, is to be aware of that and to find out what that means and who it impacts and is it the truth. So that leads me to my next question, which is, so because as you know, this show for me, this Facebook Live, has been an amazing journey where I've been talking to different people and being able to interview women entrepreneurs who are making a difference, who have impactful businesses. But my question to you is, how can we use our platforms, which are these social media platforms, and a lot of us have taken to it because we feel we can reach way more people with our messages. So my question to you is, how can we best use our platforms to better amplify and support the people in the Black community?
What you're doing is very helpful. Having the conversations with Blacks in the community. And I want to just say at this point that that means having the conversations with Blacks in the African American community, but also having the conversation with Blacks worldwide. Because right now the focus is on the United States because we are in crisis. But I would really like to say that Blacks are in crisis worldwide. It has just really come to the forefront here. And I mean, it really is a bad situation. And I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and she was one of the people who was not getting it. And part of it was because of the community that she's in is very conservative. I used to live there. I was one of just a sprinkling, like 0.01% of the African American community. And so when I left, obviously that diminished significantly. So obviously their focus is different. And she was unaware of the level of what's going on. She was unaware that on a daily basis, Blacks are getting killed in the street. And it was trying because I started to go into this whole explanation. She thought the cops were the good guys and the only Blacks that are getting killed in the streets by the cops are nefarious people. And she wasn't in the conversations. So she wasn't in at the point of understanding, even if they are nefarious, they deserve due process, so forth. So one of the things that we can do with these platforms is again to continue the discussions so that they continue to reach people, because as much as it's out there right now, there are still people who are unaware of what's going on. There are still people whose heads are steeped in ignorance because they have not had their eyes open to what's swirling all around them. And we think that this is reaching everybody, but there are small communities that are still clueless and that are still stuck where we were 2 weeks before all of this erupted. The other thing that we can do, those of us with platforms, is we can give platforms to underrepresented businesses. We can give platforms to people like myself, who I am an independent businesswoman, who, I fight to pay for large amounts of advertising to bring my brand awareness to the world, basically. I'm a worldwide business, so I fight to bring my platform to the world. But it is difficult for African Americans, for Blacks in general, and even more general than that, it is difficult for ethnic minorities to get their businesses out front and center, to get recognition for their businesses, to get respect for their businesses. And part of the problem is because of the systemic racism, there is this overarching opinion that the businesses of minorities are less effective, are less productive. Let me see if I can find my phone. There we go. That these businesses are somehow inadequate. And that's based in ignorance, because most people who are holding these views have had no interaction with the businesses at all. They're based in that racism that we discussed, that we don't even recognize, that we inherently hold.
Yeah. And I think
So
that's where it starts, right? If there's any kind of reform that's going to happen, it's going to start within us first.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so one of the things I think for people with platforms, the challenge I offer you is a lot of people with platforms don't even really have within their circle ethnic minorities. They have not made that a part of their own communities. And again, it's systemic racism. They don't even see us. We had a conversation last week about being the last children on the playground to be picked for the team, and the pain that caused. Well, that extends to our adult world. We're the last children on the playground to have our businesses picked as desirable businesses to use. And so I think that part of what we can do with these platforms is to feature other others who have businesses, other minorities. Right now, again, the focus being the African American community, but let's focus on the Black community as a whole, because this racism thing is worldwide. Blacks are in crisis worldwide. The US does not hold a monopoly on that. And right now, that's the gauge, and that's the bigger issue, because the Black communities, we're hemorrhaging. We're about to bleed to death. So we need your help. But this whole racism thing is still a bigger problem than just us. And other minority communities are in trouble as well. And they need our help as well. They need our attention. I'm part Native American. Native Americans, they're hemorrhaging as well. They are in almost as dire straits as we are, and maybe in some ways their plight is worsened by the fact that they've been whittled down to such a small people. Native Americans they're facing extinction practically. That's how bad it is for them. So we need to give them attention as well. Obviously, our Latino brothers and sisters, we always talk about the Mexicans. Let's increase our awareness that Latinos are a huge group. I'm also part Cuban. I'm Cuban American. Cubans are affected. Mexicans are affected. Guatemalans are affected. These are not all the same people. They don't even all speak the same language. We talk about Spanish and say, okay, well, let's learn Spanish, and we'll have Spanish platforms, without the understanding that the Spanish is different dialectically. And so the communication even there is different. There are all of these different minority communities that need attention. I mean, I'm going to ask you, Nasira, how many Mexican businesses do you know of? I mean,
Quite
that you personally,
honestly, not that many.
how many Black businesses do you personally patronize? How many Black businesses are you shopping at, or buying food at, or using their services or facilities?
Yep. Again, not that many. And now that it's in my awareness, now I'm sort of looking out for that, saying I want to support, and even in this platform, our society is fragmented on a whole. Like I'm so glad you brought this up, that yes, right now it is about the African Americans and we're dealing with a crisis. But in general, if we're looking at compassionate for human race and mankind, it is a society that's fragmented based on underlying foundational issues that are part of our belief systems. And until and unless we reform those, we are not going to make any kind of headway, because it starts with us. And so I'm so grateful that we are able to have this conversation. And for those people watching or on replay, I'm going to put this out there as a call to action for those women, especially women, because that's my platform, is for women entrepreneurs. But if you have a business and you are a visible minority, I want to give you a space where you can promote your business and have these kinds of conversations. Let's talk about the genius that you have within your businesses and what you can share with the world, because it's not really about the color of it's never really about the color of our skins. It's really about the essence of our character and how are we serving the world with that genius. So for me, this has been an amazing journey of learning and also helping others come together. So that's my call to action for people that are watching this, is please reach out to me. I want to give you that voice. I want to be here supporting in whichever way I can. So that is something that I think we can do together to start making some differences.
One of the other things that I think that people need to start doing is looking at other businesses and looking at each other for the gifts that they bring within their own cultural context, and not expecting them to bend to our cultural context. And I'll use Chinese food as a perfect example. And the reason being, I have several Chinese restaurants that I like to frequent. I grew up out of country, and I grew up in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, as well as in Europe. When I look for a Chinese restaurant, I look for an authentic Chinese restaurant. I look for the Chinese restaurant where the Chinese are going to eat, because they appreciate it as authentic recipes from their homeland. I remember I was in Atlanta and my child was in the hospital, and my other children and I were staying in the hospital with him. We were tired of hospital food and we wanted some good Chinese food. So we went into a Chinese restaurant that was in a Black neighborhood. And it didn't even dawn on me to think about it. Chinese food was Chinese food, and I was expecting good Chinese food. And my child was critical, and it was just a quick pit stop. So we ordered. I didn't even inspect the food. It's just like, okay, I hope we have everything. And we ran back to the hospital. When we opened the boxes of Chinese food, I looked in the box and I was thoroughly disgusted, because it was not what I expected to get. I was used to authentic Chinese food where the vegetables were barely blanched. They were crisp. They were fresh. They're vibrant looking. The flavors were bright and full of Chinese flavor. That's not what I got. I had a box of mushy American rice, some Uncle Ben's converted stuff, that had been overcooked to soften it to approximate the sticky rice. And I had canned peas and carrots as my authentic Chinese vegetables. And that was what they were calling the fried rice. And I was just, I was offended for the Chinese because this was not Chinese food. This was something that they had watered down to fit the palates of what they believe were African Americans. You know, this is how they thought we wanted the food. And I have been in Chinese restaurants, Mexican restaurants, where I'm expecting one thing and I get another. And on occasion, I've actually asked about it. It was like, well, you know, I spent time in Mexico. I lived in Mexico. I engaged to a man who's Mexican with a big Mexican family. And so there's real Mexican food. And this is not quite it. Why is this different than what you normally would fix? And they said, well, we are fixing it for the American palate. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do you. And let us come to you. Let us retrain our palates for something different. Let us learn to appreciate you for who you are. If you're Indian and your preference is for a hot curry, don't dummy it down. Let us learn to appreciate that heat. Let us learn to appreciate the pungency of the spices. Let us learn to appreciate the bitterness in a bitter melon. Let us learn to appreciate the gift that is whatever ethnic food you are bringing. And even within the white community, people are Irish, people are Italian, whatever that underlying cultural history is, bring it. White does not have to be paste in order to be American or in order to be British or whatever it is. You don't have to be paste. Bring whatever your culture brings to the table and glorify it. Share it with us proudly and let us receive it. Be honest with who you are culturally and be accepting of who other people are culturally. And if that
That's
is a part of your business, bring that.
Carol, that I think is the nugget of wisdom there, right? Is show up authentically, be who you are, and allow the others to enjoy whatever that cultural history is. No need to dummy it. But then also the other side of it is accept the other person, the way they are, the way they show up, because that speaks a lot about emotional intelligence, about us accepting each other with empathy and understanding that we have differences, but we can come together and create a world that all of those differences really give a vibrancy to all of us, because we are exposed now to so much more than just in our little world. So from that, for that, I want to thank you. I think this whole conversation has been really insightful. And as I carry on with bringing this message, I hope that I am able to accept others and as they come into my show and help others pass on their message. So from my heart to yours, I know this has been a very difficult week for you. So I'm sending you a lot of love. And I really appreciate the time you take with me on Friday to walk me through this. So thank you so much. I wish you a good weekend, and I will see you next Friday.
Thank you, Nasira, and thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the platform, and thank you for the willingness to hear ideas and thoughts that maybe have been outside of what was usual for you. and may have been outside of what was comfortable for you. I know that this journey has not been easy for you. It's never easy for us to examine our own thoughts and behavior, and to be honest with ourselves about them. And I see the authenticity in your journey, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you sharing it, because it is a brave stance. And I'm hoping that other people will be as brave as they're going forward in the world, because that is what is going to help us all to get there.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. I appreciate you. So that was our session with Cheryl. I hope that there was nuggets in there that helped you. Please reach out to either Cheryl or myself in whichever way we can help and support you. I really stand by what that's the one saying that I live by, is that we rise by lifting others. This is not a one-way journey, and we are all in this together. So please reach out to us. We are here to support and help. I wish you a wonderful, fantastic, blessed Friday. I will see you on Monday. So please have a great, safe weekend with your family, and remember to be kind to yourself and to others.